Welcome to the Master Your Millions podcast, the show all about your financial potential and leaving a legacy for future generations. Here are your hosts, Jason and Scott Henderson.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, Scott Henderson, and my co-host is Dr. J. We're experienced investors with a huge advantage of over 100 years of wisdom and experience in investing. We are super excited for our guest today. He's a longtime friend of ours. Jason, who do we have coming on today?
Well, Scott, one way I'd like to introduce this guy is the one that got away. I was first introduced to Jaiden Olsen, I would want to say almost a decade ago. He was actually dating my niece, and I was secretly rooting for him to be the one that she wound up with. That did not happen. However, it's been a delight to stay in touch with Jaiden. He's now a father of 3 boys, has a long history in real estate and being successful. In fact, is really killing it. I want to tell you, though, up front, folks, that early on when he was young, his dad's an electrician, and he is at one time a journeyman electrician, was working for his dad, doing quite well. He's very good at his craft. And then the 2008-2009 recession hit. He decided to go back to school. And then I think that's where he eventually met us and became friends. And I actually have had him work at my house and on some of my personal rental properties. Very good at what he does. So when he talks about real estate, he's coming up from that point of view that he knows a lot about construction and he can look at a project. So I know on his team, he's the go-to guy for that kind of stuff. So welcome, Jaiden Olsen. We're happy to have you here with us.
Thanks so much, Jason. Appreciate the introduction. I mean, I was thinking about it. It's been more than a decade. It's been almost 13 years, I think, since we met.
Wow. Then you were 2 at the time, or what?
Just about, yeah.
You're both getting old.
So, Jaiden, I tell us a little bit. You said a minute ago, so you lost your job. Your dad had to downsize his business a lot, and you decided to go back to school, and you thought you were going to be an electrical engineer. What's happened there?
Yeah, so at the time, I was just out of high school for a little while. I'd been working as an electrician since I was just growing up in the field. I knew electrical, and I was really good at it. And my dad encouraged me to go back to school, and the obvious decision was to go back into electrical engineering because I've always had a passion for mathematics and physics. And I looked at my options and decided to go up to Utah State, which is a great decision. And it's actually taken me a while to really appreciate the magnitude of that decision and the benefit that graduating with a master's degree has really had in my life. But yeah, the electrical engineering didn't end up working out. It was way too abstract thinking. I liked working on visual projects, and so I gravitated more towards structural engineering, which is what I ended up graduating in.
And what was your starting salary, did you say?
I graduated making $41,600 a year, which was $3 an hour less than I made as an electrician 7 years prior.
With a master's.
With a master's. So my master's degree was paying off real quick. I was real excited about it.
Oh, that's funny. That really is funny. So, you were here in Logan, you graduated, and then you kind of went off the radar a little bit. I mean, we had a lot of discussions about all kinds of things. We'll get into that. However, you went off the radar a little bit, and the next thing I know, man, you are buying real estate and fixing it up and flipping it and doing all kinds of things. What happened? How did you get there?
One thing that I think we lack tremendously in our education system is, sorry, did I lose you? Can you hear me?
We can hear you okay.
One thing I think our education system lacks tremendously is actually painting an accurate picture of what lifestyle you're signing up for when you graduate with a degree. And I think it's really important for our young listeners or parents that they help their kids or they understand what lifestyle they're actually signing up for when they pursue a degree in a specific field. One thing that I quickly realized is that structural engineers work really, really hard. They sit at a desk all day and they rarely get to see their projects, and they have 2 weeks of paid vacation, and the top guys in the industry are making $100,000 a year if they're lucky, you know. And right off the bat, I knew that I didn't want to be stuck in that lifestyle. I mean, I grew up, my dad ran his construction business. He had free time to the extent that he wanted it. And that was just a really hard transition for me to even understand or comprehend. And so that's the biggest motivator that I had is I've got a wife and kids at this point, and I'm not getting the time that I want with my family. So I've got to look for alternative income streams. And that was my motivation at that time. But
And what drew you towards, I mean, your first deal, was that a fix and flip or?
no, so yeah, good question. It's 2015, 2014 when I started reading about real estate. I found real estate because I was actually researching a presidential candidate at the time named Donald Trump, who co-authored a book with Robert Kiyosaki, and I started reading a bunch of Robert Kiyosaki, and obviously found Rich Dad Poor Dad. And I think that I had heard about Rich Dad Poor Dad before, but I never really like read it or been in the right frame of mind to fully understand Rich Dad Poor Dad. But I read that book and I was hooked. And that was about the first year that I started my career as a structural engineer. And I started getting into podcasts, doing a lot of research, reading YouTube, and really found a passion for financial freedom through real estate investing. That led to me writing a lot of offers on multifamily apartment complexes, is where I decided I wanted to focus my efforts. I switched jobs so that I had more flexibility with my schedule. I found a job that it paid a little bit less than I was making at the previous firm, but I was working 4 days a week instead of 5 days a week. So I had 1 day a week to pursue my real estate investing dreams. And the result of that, I ended up buying a 6-unit apartment complex in Ogden on seller financing for $10,000 out of my pocket at 4.9% interest for 10 years with a 10-year balloon. And that was my first investment.
Wow, you went big the first one. A 16 plex?
I tried. It's a sixplex.
A sixplex.
Yep.
How did that turn out? What went on there?
Yeah, so I bought it day one with zero cash flow. I knew that I was scared to death during the acquisition of that property, as you can imagine. I mean, going from no assets to buying a sixplex was a big jump for me. And I'm a critical thinker. We had meth come back that was a little bit high. So I had to do a little bit of meth remediation. That was terrifying. I knew that I was paying more than the property was worth at the time because I had $0 in cash flow on day one. And there was a lot of things that I was really nervous about. And I bought that in 2018 is when I purchased that. But I knew that I had hustle, I had drive and know-how to go in, renovate the property myself, increase the rents. I knew the rents were low. And so I took the rents from $450 a month up to $900 a month in the course of about 2.5 years. And we ended up selling that property in 2021. And I made $330,000 on that project in that time. Now, the cash flow was not much to speak of because we were dumping everything back into renovation. But that was my first deal in real estate. And I've just been hooked ever since.
You did most of that on your own, or did you have some partners?
So my dad was my partner on that. You mentioned my dad downsized his company in 2008, and he lost all of his retirement savings at that point. And so I really tried to help build that for my dad. So he and I partnered on that project together, but it was just the two of us, and we did all the renovations and everything. We borrowed the $10,000 down payment for the property from my home equity line of credit. My dad paid for the legal fees and structuring that way to set it up, and off we went.
That is so cool. So your team was you and your dad. What a great experience.
It was so fun. Yep.
Yeah. Then what came next?
Yeah. So I was obviously hooked on real estate. I knew that that's where I wanted to be. I had the systems and market to my multifamily network, marketing and contact those individuals. I was doing a lot of phone calls to off-market listings, calling brokers, emailing people, sending mailers, any way that I could reach out to off-market multifamily properties between Salt Lake, Davis, and Weber counties. And then in 2019, I ended up hiring one of my buddies who I met up at Utah State to cold call for me because my time and resources were limited, and I knew that I needed to offload some of those processes. And we ended up getting an 18-unit apartment complex under contract within the first week that he was hired as my cold caller. That one was a really interesting deal. The seller was an older guy. He had a property he was buying in Boston, and he said, if I sell this property right now, I can do a 1031 exchange into this property I was buying in Boston. I need to be able to close this in 10 days. You can't walk the property. There's no due diligence, and I need $10,000 earnest money right now, non-refundable, if you're going to lock this deal up. And this is an 18-unit in North Salt Lake. At the time, he was asking for $2 million, based on square footage, where it was at, and the size of the property. I knew it was a deal. I knew that we were getting a good price on it. I was a little bit scared about not being able to see the property, but I decided to do it anyway. So I borrowed $10,000 from my home equity line of credit again, gave it to the seller, put myself out there, and I made 3 phone calls, and we were able to wholesale that to a buddy of mine and made $100,000 in less than 10 days through wholesaling that 18-unit apartment complex. And at that point, I decided I could quit my job and go full time. So that was kind of the next deal that we did. Yeah.
So it sounds like to me, to some degree, you've been building a team, if you will. One of the things we talk about on our podcast and kind of pound on as kind of a soapbox, if you will, is that you're going to get into investing, whether that's in real estate, franchises, tax liens, certificates, whatever it is, you need a team. And it's best to do it that way, although it seems like to some degree you went it alone the first time. How's it going for you, and what are you doing to build a team around you so you can handle more business?
Yeah, so you guys can hear me, right?
Yeah.
I can't get any video. I'm not sure what's going on, so I'm glad you guys can hear me. Yeah, teams are critical to finding success, and I think it's more than just like my immediate marketing team or whatever else we have there. But surround yourself with good lawyers, good accountants, great contractors, people with the know-how and skill to analyze a deal, all kinds of stuff that way. My personal team, yeah, we've tried, like you said, Jason, it's critical to find people that know more than you and are better at what you're doing to really find a lot of success. And I found that as I was networking to these off-market sellers, I had a really hard time closing deals. I called almost 5,000 people before I landed that 18-unit deal. And it wasn't until I offloaded the systems and taught somebody else how to do it that we actually landed a deal that was lucrative. So learning the systems, but being able to teach somebody else to do the systems better than you did is a critical skill. It's critical to being successful.
So Jaiden, as going through this automation, I know you personally as an expert at this. I know some of how your businesses are run. I've seen it.
Yeah.
How have you been able, get specific for us? What is it that you've been able to do to automate?
There's a book by Michael Gerber called The E-Myth, and I'm sure you guys have read it, but he talks about being able to identify the tasks that you're performing that you can offload. And it is a skill that I am far from mastered. I'm glad you consider me an expert, but I have so much to learn as far as offloading tasks. But more than anything, it's about identifying those tasks, taking the time to figure out what you can offload, and then figuring out how to put it all together in a manual or a book or a instructional video to teach somebody else how to do it, right? And that's the hard part.
So tell me how, let's go just for a second. Walk me through that first step. How are you identifying what tasks you can offload?
So if I'm really specific, I'm going to sit down in the morning and I'm going to get a notepad before I even start my day. I'm going to set it down and I'm going to intentionally describe, say, 15-minute blocks throughout the day. And I'm going to jot down what I've been doing and how I did it and what I'm the steps on. It starts with identifying the tasks that you're actually performing and then identifying how to do those tasks. And it's time consuming and difficult, but for I own an engineering business now. I have to go through and figure out, hey, this is how I put together my plans for my clients. I go through and I draw a foundation plan. I go through and draw a roof plan. I go through and draw floor framing plans. Then we can do the seismic analysis. Then we can do the snow loads. Then we can do all these things. But identifying those tasks and being specific about the order of those tasks, and then helping other people understand the general scope of the project before you can even begin to offload those tasks.
I gotcha. So if I'm understanding correctly, you're essentially going through and doing what people do when they first start trying to lose weight. They track every single calorie that goes into their body, and then you make your adjustments from there. Is that a fair comparison?
That's a great analogy. And I think that you're exactly right, that it just starts with tracking and knowing what your days look like, right? I mean, half of us go through our day-to-day processes and we look back in the evening and say, what did I get done today? And you can't even put a finger on it, right? If you're not tracking it, you can't improve it. You can't measure it, right?
Sure. So now I know a lot of people who are first starting, they want to get to where you are, where most of your systems are automated. But one of the things that scares a lot of people when they start talking automation is the cost to things. So we're going to go through, we're going to track everything, we're going to list things out. Are there certain criteria that you're looking at being like, okay, so if this task costs me this much, or how are you evaluating that to understand if that cost makes sense?
I want to address that question from a higher level. And this is more of a mindset thing than otherwise. But it is scary to offload those tasks and hire it out and like realize more overhead in your businesses. But I think it's important that you recognize that when you make the decision to hire somebody, it shouldn't be viewed as an expense. You're offloading that task to buy yourself more time, and it's an asset to your company to have employees in your business. Like if I were to go to a business valuation guy and say, hey, I do all these things, I'm saving all this money by doing it all myself, yada, yada, yada. If I go to sell my business, I'm worthless because I sell my business. I'm the one that has all of the systems and processes in place that I complete myself. And so when you're looking to offload those things, view it as an asset is the number one thing that I would say. But yeah, you have to recognize that there's also costs associated with those things, but don't be so small-minded enough to say that you're not going to get additional business to cover those people, because in all reality, if you find the right person and put them in the right seat, they're going to double your income, regardless of what their cost is.
I absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. So if you were what you know of right now and what you have gone through and understand now, you're going back to Jaiden as he is sitting in university, what would you tell him? You got one piece of advice you can give him.
Buy Bitcoin. Just teasing. One piece of advice to Jaiden Olsen 10 years ago. I mean, the biggest key to anybody's financial success is financial education. And I would just encourage Jaiden Olsen 10 years ago to understand how money works and what defines an asset. Like if I took one thing away from Rich Dad Poor Dad, it's what's an asset, what's a liability. And that financial education piece is absolutely critical to anybody finding success, regardless of the industry or business they're pursuing.
Okay. Would you, speaking to education, do you feel like there's any education that is overvalued when pertaining to finance or this particular subject? Or is it all worth it?
That's a tough question. I think, that's a really tough question. And I'm really stubborn when it comes to paying for education, because I think there's so many valuable free resources online, like the Money Master Your Millions podcast, for instance. There's so many valuable free resources. I mean, it's hard to put a number on what's valuable. That being said, I can give an example of where I tried to go into a new market. I tried to buy a 50-unit apartment complex in Ohio. And I was stubborn enough to not hire somebody with experience or to not pay a consultant to help me through the process. And I ended up losing about $30,000 on that deal, when the course to take to learn how to do that deal and save it, now that I have the education that I didn't have before, was about $10,000. And so I think that there's a fine balance to be had. I think more importantly, it's what education do you need? Be able to identify what you're missing and what assets you need as far as education goes, and then absolutely be willing to pay for it.
Awesome.
And we can go on and on for I think a lot of degrees that people go to for school is a waste of money. But if you know what you want and you know what you need to make a good financial decision, university can be the best decision you've ever made, right?
I was going to say too, like there's several people that I know that are worth billions of dollars who spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to have 1 hour or spend one day with one person. And they deem that as
Absolutely.
worth it. And it's funny to me when I have a lot of people who come to me and ask, they're like, I've got this course, it's $30,000 or it's $10,000 or whatever. And they're so focused on the cost rather than, like you said, the asset of having that knowledge that
Yeah.
they get sidetracked. So yeah, I very much agree with that.
Yeah, to add to that, I mean, I still think that continuing education in my life is very important. My budget for myself right now is $25,000 a year, whether that be personal mindset coaches, business coaches, personal trainers. I mean, I still pay for coaching and education every single year, and I think that it's top priority for myself.
Love it. Jason, you were going to say something?
No, I was going to add, whether it's 10, you said 10 or $30,000 for the course, some people will balk over $300 for a course.
Yeah.
And it's like, some of it makes no sense. And I'm with you. There's a lot of free resources out there. I want to sort of shift gears a little bit. What would you say, how well you know the infinite banking concept between 1 and 10?
5. That seems like a
yeah.
seems
Okay.
like
I'm actually surprised that you said 5, for the fact that you are one of the few people in Utah that have actually sat through Nelson Nash's personal.
and I've read the book. I only say 5 because it's been 10 years since I had the course or read the book. I do have my life insurance policy set up for myself, my wife, and my kids. But I mean, honestly, I've only had those for 3 or 4 years. And if I would have taken your advice years ago, I mean, I'd have a lot more money to play with in that realm. I think I understand the idea, but I mean, to say that I know how to do it, I couldn't say that I do because I haven't done it. How's that?
Well, so you were talking about education and the value of that, and you have someone who's a friend that would help you with that education. It's time that you take the opportunity and learn.
Absolutely.
And let's spend some time together and go through it. I mean, I heard you early on, you said, okay, I took a loan against my HELOC, which is, you're broaching the whole idea of being your own banker by using an asset that you already have as collateral to invest in real estate. Absolutely. I believe the ultimate collateral is the cash value of a whole life insurance policy. When you given all the different parameters, I mean, you go back to your HELOC, that was great. That interest could have been tax deducted, because it was mortgage interest. However, we did learn in 2008, 2009 that there were a lot of people that had loans out on their HELOCs that got called in, right? Yeah. They were canceling HELOCs left and right. There were a lot of people that I knew that were using that to get themselves out of debt fast. And when you take the whole parameter together, the whole life insurance policy is absolutely the best. There's other things that work pretty good, but there's nothing that quite like that. But obviously, that's something that's been of interest to you. It's been in the back of your mind for quite a while.
Yeah. I have questions on that, and we don't have to dive into it now. Maybe we should follow up after the show.
Yeah, I'd love to talk that would be cool. Yeah. I just like to know that, that's something. You're one of the few people that I know of that actually have been to Nelson's gone now, right? He's dead.
Yeah.
And he came as a guest of mine to Logan, Utah to put on his seminar that he was doing. I mean, he ended up doing it 35 years. He traveled around the country every year doing 40 to 45 seminars a year. I mean, the guy was relentless in teaching that concept that really, when you look at it from a macro point of view, leads people to financial freedom and independence.
Sure. Absolutely.
You were saying earlier, when you're at our house having dinner, there are a couple of times some discussions that we had that started to open your mind to start to think outside the box. Do you remember what some of those topics were other than the infinite banking concept?
Yeah, we talked penny stocks. We talked rentals, some of those things early on. I'm trying to, I mean, general financial education is not something that I had a great exposure to growing up. And just knowing you, Jason, and you got a PhD in chemistry, and now this guy's, he's what, teaching finance? Like, what's up with this guy? I had to know more, you know, that you're a unique role model. And I'm grateful that I had those conversations at that time in my life.
Well, I'm grateful for the conversations as well. That's what you've done is phenomenal. You know, I need to brag on Jaiden a little bit. And maybe you can tell us how it came about. Jaiden has a 2020 Corvette, which is it?
2021 Corvette Stingray.
And it's a blue one, right?
It is rapid blue is the color of the car.
Beautiful. Yeah. And I'm jealous.
Car.
I'm totally jealous. That car is so sweet. Now, my understanding is you have actually rented that out through Turo?
Only twice. And I should back this up, Jason. I want you to know that I don't advocate anybody go buy a car like that, because I did not make that decision to buy that vehicle from a financial standpoint. That was not the reason that I made that car.
Why did you
purchase that car?
Why did you buy it?
I set a goal in March of this year to 10x the revenue in my business. And I said, if I accomplish this goal, I wanted to set a reward for that goal that was purely pleasure-based. I had no justification from a pain-based motivation. And that goes into human psychology and where we actually find our motivations in life. And so 2021 Corvette Stingray was so far out of my comfort zone that, like, there's no other justification than to say, I want that car. It'd be fun to drive and I want to try it. And so I said that as my reward. And in 3 months this year, we were able to take the revenue in my engineering business from $7,000 a month to over $50,000 a month by the end of Q1. And I was blown away by that success. It was incredible. And I didn't think I was actually going to be able to buy a Corvette, because the lines for waiting around those are like 2 to 3 years in most cases. But my dealer, who I talked about this goal with in January, called me the day that I accomplished that goal and said, hey, you're not going to believe this, but there's this Corvette coming in on Saturday, and I don't have a buyer for it. So you're my guy that I thought of. Would you be interested? I'm like, yep. Like, okay, well, you need to put down payment on it right now before I call the next guy down the list. I was like, okay. And so I ended up buying a Corvette. But it's one of those things where I accomplished a huge goal, and I didn't want to deprive my mentality of receiving that pleasure-based reward. And when it fell in my lap like that, I mean, it was just a no-brainer. But it was not I wouldn't say it was a smart financial decision, but that's not why I did it. Right?
Yeah, but that's so cool. And it's so educational, if you will. You set a big goal and you set a reward at the end of it. And it's not a coincidence that the guy who has it calls you on the day that you realize that you have accomplished it, right? Yep. On the very day that you accomplished your goal, this guy calls out of the blue and said, hey, here it is. That is way cool. So one of these times, Jaiden, I want a ride in that thing. I've seen pictures and stuff.
Forget a ride. I'm driving that thing.
I will give you a ride. My one qualification is I put 300 miles a month on that thing. So you got to come to me. So come get a ride.
I got to come to you to get a ride. Okay.
Yeah.
Now I've got to ask, and I know that we kind of glossed over this a little bit, but 3 months, how long did you think it would take you to hit that goal?
My goal was 3 months.
Was it really?
It was 3 months, it's one of those things that is so astronomically huge. Like, I had a general idea of strategy, but I think it's important that we recognize that if you're going to 10x the revenue in your business, you can't get sucked into the strategy of how you're going to do it. Because if you try to grind your way into that kind of change, you'll never get there. Like, there's only 24 hours in a day. And at that point, I was already working 8 to 10 hours a day. I mean, I can only possibly 3x that if I eliminate all my sleep, right? And so I knew that it was going to take some out of the box thinking and really big shifts in my business to get there. But again, it's about setting massive goals to think outside the box.
What were some of the keys that got you there?
Yeah, for me, it was hiring people, identifying tasks that I could offload. And I spent all of January figuring out what I needed to offload, and then finding places to bring more people into the business to actually get the work done. And then I had to focus on the marketing. Where am I going to get additional work? Because that's another big piece to that business that it was a puzzle piece that I had to figure out. So what I did is I started marketing to a lot of the real estate investor associations. I marketed to home inspectors groups here in the Wasatch Front, and I just started advertising myself as a structural engineer to do all of your take care of anything you've got. I stopped saying no to work. Previously, I was saying no to work that was too time consuming for myself, and I just said I'm going to do it, and I'm going to figure out how to do it. So I hired an office assistant to do all my scheduling and to do all my billings. And then I hired a drafter to do all of my computer work. And then I hired another engineer to do all the calculations. And I just said, I'm going to step into a management role and see how fast we can make this thing grow. And I got to be totally honest, it was a whirlwind, and it was, a very, very stressful period of time. But that being said, I did experience massive growth, and I kind of backed off of growing the business and focused on managing the business. And I'm happy to say that we've averaged over $60,000 a month since then for the remainder of this year. We're on track to hit our biggest month ever right now. And I've got a team that is awesome. I'm generally speaking, I'm working less than 10 to 20 hours in my engineering business right now because I'm getting better at managing my team members, which is awesome.
So Jaiden, in the event that Dan Kennedy could hear what you told us just now, he'd be super excited. He wrote a book called Who Not How. And yes, what he talks about is that when you're doing big goals, you should not be thinking
I'm sorry,
about how.
Who Not How? I thought that was Benjamin Hardy.
There might be two
listeners. Okay, there may be two. Yeah,
I'm pretty sure the one that I'm talking about that I've read is Dan Kennedy's book.
Sorry to interrupt.
Dan Sullivan. Yep. Sorry,
Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy. Yep.
And Benjamin Hardy. You're right. I was wrong. Thank you for that.
That doesn't happen often. We have this on recording.
Yeah, do we have it on recording? I'm wrong. Thanks a lot, Scott. I'll own on to it. But yeah, no. In the event that Dan Sullivan could hear, that's his whole message is what you exactly went through, right? And it's part of the message of, back to what we're saying on this podcast, folks, in Master Your Millions, we want you to be able to master, and what that means is accumulate, hold on to, and enjoy and pass on millions. You become the master of the money. Then you have time freedom and all kinds of other things that can come into your life. Part of that has to do with who is in your life, who is on your team. Jaiden, that's a great example. Rewind it, listen to him again, what he said a minute ago, and there's a pattern there that you can apply to whatever the business that you're passionate about, that you have superpowers in, whether that be in real estate, Amazon store, anything.
At whatever level too.
At whatever level too. Yeah, it's awesome. I
think that the biggest lesson to me, I guess, today of the experience that I went through earlier this year is that the only thing stopping me from 10xing my business again is the real estate between my ears. Like, I understand that it's possible. I understand that I can do it. I can't focus on the strategy. It's just being in the right frame of mind and being ready to take that next step. And I'm going to do it someday. I'm just not quite sure that I'm ready. Like, more than anything, it's the fear in myself of that responsibility. To go from $50,000 a month to $500,000 a month is intimidating to me. And so I've got a lot to work on personally to get to that point.
How are you going to do that?
It's possible.
How are you going to work on that? What might be because there's other people have the fear of getting to 5,000 a month, right?
Sure.
And you're right. It's between our ears. What have been your mechanisms, or how have you gone about changing that mindset so that becomes a reality?
Yeah. Yesterday was a fairly stressful day for me for various reasons, but I went into my office and I had a personal meditation. And I do this occasionally. It's guided. You can search guided meditations on YouTube for stress or whatever. But this one was just music and I was just in my head. But I took a minute and said, what I'm going through is hard and it's stressful. And I said, or I ended up taking away these few things. I'm capable of taking this kind of responsibility. Also, there's other people that are doing 10x more than I am, and they're capable of operating on that level too? And am I the person who's going to be capable of operating at 10x the level that I currently am? And what is stopping me from getting there? And the things that I've said in the past have been responsibility. Like if I'm bringing in $500,000 a month, that's a ton of responsibility. It's a ton of employees. It's responsible for the livelihoods of lots of individuals, like families. Like if I screw up my business, I'm putting families on the street at that point. And that's a ton of responsibility. But I had to acknowledge and accept that I am doing really well right now. I'm capable of handling this stress, and that I have a desire and a goal to contribute at a level that is higher. In other words, just to grow, to become the better version of me. And so coping with that stress and identifying that I can do it by surrounding myself with the right team, like we talked about earlier, and adapting to the circumstances and the environment economically or whatever else is going on. It's totally possible. And I think that it's all on the personal level. Like you have to acknowledge that we are built for greater things, and we're here on this world. We've only got one shot, and we might as well contribute at any level that we possibly can. And I'm a firm believer that when we contribute at that higher level, we're fulfilling our divine responsibility, or however you want to call it.
Well said. Well, we could end it right there, and we'd be just
I think
fine.
so too, man. That was just boom, boom. I mean, this guy's full of it, full of wisdom. And man, geez, I agree, Scott. We could end it right there.
Okay. Well, anything else you want to add then?
I mean, we can talk about anything you want, but yeah, whatever you think.
Well, I would love to come back and check up on you in another couple months and get you back on here. I know a lot of people are going to want to see what's going to happen and want to see this next 10x. And and we will connect after the show because I have some other thoughts as well. But Jason, any last words?
Just thank you. I'm humbled to know you, Jaiden. You've always been a good guy, and I love and cheer and root for your success, continued success. I love it. I'm cheering for
back
you.
at you, Jason and Scott. Thanks so much.
Yeah, super glad you're here. If any of our listeners wanted to connect with you, how would they do so?
Social media is usually the best. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. My handle is at Jaiden Olsen 23.
Perfect. We will put it in the show notes down below. Also, as well as if you would like to connect with us, make sure to hit us up on our Facebook group, Instagram, or Twitter, or shoot us an email. All of the links will be in the show note descriptions down below. Remember, mastering your millions all starts with your mind and your team. Make sure they are the best. Catch you next time.
Thanks for listening to Master Your Millions with Jason and Scott Henderson. Check the show notes for any links or contact information about today's guest. Make sure to follow the show so you don't miss any future episodes.